Yes, gladly. Uh, for you who don't know Sandy Chung yet, she is the Executive Director of the ACLU of Oregon, and is one of the preeminent people in Oregon fighting for our rights, and fighting for all of our rights, and doing some incredible work in building the coalitions we need to strengthen Oregon and make it a safer space for everyone. So tonight, of the myriad of projects that they are working on, Sandy is here to share with us the ERA, the Equal Rights Amendment, and how we can help support that initiative to get that on the ballot in 2026. So I hand it to you, Sandy. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you so much, Tim. And I just have to tell everyone how much I am just a fan and supporter of all of the indivisibles and how impressed I've been by your work to protect our democracy. I'm going to try to share my screen. If you could do a screen share for me, Tim, or one of the folks who has control over the Zoom.
And Sandy, you're centered right now. Oh, you need control of the,
Yeah, if
yes.
you could,
Oh,
oh,
okay.
it looks like I have it now.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, one sec. Is everyone able to see the slide deck?
Yes.
And I do have all of you also on a second screen. And so I will try to monitor the chat, but I may not be super successful. And so I can also answer questions at the very end. So tonight we're going to do signature gathering training for the Equal Rights for All campaign. And in the chat, I'd love if you can share why you support equal rights for all Oregonians, regardless of our sex, gender identity, or sexual orientation. And let me share with you why I'm so passionate about this campaign. Uh, so my husband and I are the love of our lives. His name is Luke Chongpasin. He is a 12-year-old, just started sixth grade this school year. He loves video games, writing poetry. We've always called Luke since he was a baby a hall monitor. Doesn't break the rules easily. I think there was like a kids environmental rally we went to. He felt really nervous being loud, wanted to follow the rules. And I told Luke, hey, Luke, sometimes the rules are good, sometimes they're not. So sometimes you have to break the rules. But Luke is the love of our lives, and I don't take for granted that Luke is in our lives. I actually had a really difficult pregnancy journey. As my husband and I were trying to build our family, I had several miscarriages. And I think what sometimes people don't know that even miscarriage healthcare at times is considered abortion care. And if you can't get that healthcare service, that can actually impact our ability to have kids in the future. So even after I became pregnant with Luke and passed through my first trimester and then into my second, and so we were feeling more self-assured, actually at about 27 weeks, 26, 27 weeks, I started having early contractions. And at first I thought maybe these are the Braxton Hicks contractions that doctors talk about that are like fake contractions. But I remember this particular day where I was at work and I just felt really off. My body felt off. And I remember my stomach feeling really just like heavy. And I just remember feeling very warm all day. And the contractions continued. And so I got home and we started kind of counting the timing of the contractions, and it just didn't feel right. So we went to the emergency room. And I remember the doctor looking pretty worried and just simply saying, hey, we need to get you into labor and delivery now. And so I had to stay in labor delivery for a couple of nights while they tried to stop the contractions. And thankfully, through that process and afterwards, I was able to keep Luke in until 36 weeks and then he came. But I also remember during that whole journey where, I just wasn't sure what was exactly going to happen. I had a lot of questions, like what if questions, like what if something happens with my baby's health? What if something happens with my health? Those were questions that I couldn't answer at that point. But I remember one thing that was really clear to me, that whatever choice I made had to be my choice, along with, the guidance I would get from my healthcare providers. In my marriage, I felt, I could talk to my husband, but ultimately it really had to be my choice because it was about my body, my life, and my future. And ultimately, this is what the Equal Rights for All campaign is about, to make sure that we really make very clear in the Oregon Constitution that the right to bodily and life autonomy, the right to personal autonomy and self-determination, that is codified in our Equal Rights Amendment and the Oregon Constitution. So what it does is currently the Oregon Constitution does have an Equal Rights Amendment that basically says the government can't discriminate based on sex. But it doesn't clarify what that means, and our courts have never had the chance to clarify what that means. And so we're making very clear that that protection includes sex, gender identity, and sexual orientation, and that these protections encompass related healthcare decisions like abortion, IVF, and gender affirming care, as well as same gender marriage. What our ballot measure also does, it repeals a current clause in the Oregon Constitution that defines marriage as between a man and a woman. This was something that was put in by voters about 20 years ago. It is inoperative currently because of U.S. Supreme Court case law, but we know the U.S. Supreme Court has been going backwards, not forwards. And so we need to proactively take this out because in the case the U.S. Supreme Court says we're not going to recognize the right to same-gender marriage, this clause could actually come back to life. And although we would try our best to stop it, it could invalidate same-gender marriages in Oregon under the Oregon Constitution. So we need to take it out. The only way to do that is via ballot measure. So we're like, let's take this out and also make very clear what our Equal Rights Amendment protects. So this is the full constitutional language. And if you actually look at the petition, it also has the title, which I will share with you a little bit later on. I forgot to paste it in. But the full constitutional language that we're adding is this. If you look at this language, the unbolded parts are the parts that are already in the Constitution right now, and the bolded parts are what we're putting in. But basically, we're clarifying that on account of sex includes laws, policy, and its actions that discriminate in intent or effect based on pregnancy/pregnancy outcomes and related health decisions, gender identity and related health decisions, sexual orientation, or sex. And then it also says the section is repealed, and this is the same, that marriage is defined as between a man and a woman. So what do we need to do right now? So there are two ways to get a measure on the ballot. One is via legislative referral. We had considered that a couple years ago and tried, and all of our Democratic senators and House of Representative members in the Oregon state legislature were very supportive. But then the Republicans walked out and said, if you don't take this off the table, we're not coming back. So we were like, you know what? There's a lot of important laws, legislative activity that's important. Let's take this off the table. And what we can do is get this on the ballot via ballot signatures. We need about 160, 170 signatures. However, most ballot measure campaigns will overshoot the actual minimum required because some of the signatures are not going to be valid. And so what we are aiming to submit to the Oregon Secretary of State's office by June 2026 is 250,000 signatures. So what does this mean? How do we get to 250,000? If we had 500 volunteers, we would need signatures, 500 signatures from each of them that they gathered. If 1,000, 250 signatures from each of them. If 2,000 volunteers, 125 signatures. If you also break down the number of volunteers, if we had 200 teams of 5 people each, that's 1,000 volunteers. Now you might say, oh, like 500 signatures, that seems pretty hard. I have to tell you, when I was at the May Day rally this last Wednesday, I gathered about 50 signatures in an hour. Just because at these rallies, people are very hungry to take action and protect our rights. And so I had 2 clipboards. I would basically say, hey, I'm the executive director of the ACLU of Oregon. We're trying to protect abortion and reproductive health rights like IVF, as well as gender identity and related healthcare decisions, and sexual orientation and same-gender marriage in the Oregon Constitution. And people would say, what's the title? Okay, let me sign that. Let me help you get that on the ballot. So, if I had basically worked for about 5 hours at the rally, I could have reached my 250 signature goal. And in fact, at the Portland rally, the hands-off rally, my coworker canvassed for a couple hours getting signatures, and they gathered, I think, about 180 signatures. So, especially in the current climate, people are really hungry to do something. And so, it's really actually pretty easy for folks to get these signatures. And so, the more signatures we can get this summer, the more time it means that our campaign can reserve our resources, both our time as well as monetary resources, to prepare to fight back against the negative messaging and attacks that we will know will be brought forth by Trump and Vance and probably Elon Musk against this ballot measure next year. Uh, because we have seen when there are these types of measures, the anti-democracy folks do go after them. So to signature gather, how do you break the ice? There's a couple ways, right? One way is to say, hey, I'm volunteering for this ballot measure campaign for the 2026 ballot. It protects abortion rights, IVF rights, gender affirming care, and same gender marriage. Would you like to sign this petition? Another way to start would be to say, did you know that the Oregon Constitution still defines marriage as between a man and a woman? I'm volunteering on this campaign to get rid of this outdated language and protect related rights too. Would you like to learn more and sign this petition so we can get this on the ballot next year? Another way to say this, which is also consistent with our ballot measure, is to say, hey, I'm volunteering on this ballot measure campaign, and it affirms in Oregon's constitution that the government and politicians can't discriminate against any Oregonian based on our sex, gender identity, or sexual orientation. Are you interested in learning more and signing this petition so we can get this on the ballot? Now, when I was canvassing at the May Day, that was it. And people were like, okay, some people would be like, well, what's the ballot title? And I would show them. It's actually on the signature gathering sheet. So I would just point and they would read it and they'd be like, okay, I'm going to sign. Some people would say, can I read the ballot language? And then I would show it to them again. And it's very simple. And so they would sign. Some people, I would just say the intro and they'd be like, great, let me sign it. But if they want more information, again, here's information. And what I'm going to do is I have a resource for you and I'll put a link to the slide deck so you can go through it again. But again, this is a ballot measure campaign for November 2026. It asks voters to update our Constitution to make clear that we all have equal rights to make our own private personal decisions about our health care, regardless of our sex, gender identity, or sexual orientation. And this is a way of safeguarding Oregonians from anti-democracy politicians who want to take away these rights to privacy, freedom, and personal autonomy away from us and, basically control us. And sometimes too, it's helpful if you can say, hey, this is a ballot measure that's supported by many organizations, including ACLU, Planned Parenthood, Basic Rights Oregon, Latino Network, Unite Oregon, and many more. I wanted to go through with you some common questions. Sometimes people say, well, aren't these rights already protected in Oregon? And it is true. They are already protected in our statutory law. And so I say, yes, they are protected in our statutory law. And in fact, we're really lucky to live in a state where we have very strong statutory protections in these areas. And then I say, but do you think we can count on Trump to not come after us? Do you think we can count on the US Supreme Court to not try to roll this back? And people are like, no, we definitely cannot count on that. And because we are in such a landscape where there is so much aggression against these very basic rights that we should all have the right to, the strongest way for Oregonians is to protect these rights is to make sure that not only are they in our statutory laws, but also in our state constitution. And that's why we're doing it, because this is basically the strongest law for our state. Some people will also ask, are these new rights? And also, like, why are you lumping sex and abortion as well as gender identity and sexual orientation together? And so here I do tell folks, this ballot measure and what it's doing, it's very consistent with current US Supreme Court law, which says non-discrimination based on sex includes protections based on sex, gender identity, and sexual orientation. And one of the reasons that we're doing this together is that we want to affirm current law that's recognized by the US Supreme Court. And we have to do this because we know we can't count on the US Supreme Court to go backwards on these types of basic common sense legal definitions. And so we need to do that in our state constitution while we still have time. And so, yes, this is all very consistent with current law. In normal times, I don't know that this ballot measure would necessarily be as necessary as now. but we are not in normal times where not only is the White House attacking basic personal rights, but unfortunately, we have a lot of anti-democracy justices on the Supreme Court doing the same thing. So here are some rules about when you're circulating the petition. So first, in addition to the signature sheet, which has 10 lines for signatures on the front page and more information on the back page, you also have to carry the full text of the ballot measure with you. And that just makes sense because you want people to be able to read the ballot measure if they want to. Second, you have to personally witness all the signatures that are being done on the signature sheets. So you can't just like go to a party and leave it somewhere and then come back. You do have to like personally witness people signing it. When you are done gathering all of your signatures, so each of the sheets has 10 lines, you don't necessarily have to fill out all 10 lines. You could be like, you know what, I'm done after 5. I'm going to send it back to the ballot measure campaign. You have to sign at the bottom. And after a couple more slides, I'll actually show you what the signature sheet looks like. But you basically sign at the bottom and you also print your name and provide your address and do a date. But you're basically certifying things like, yes, I personally witnessed all the signatures being done here. To the best of my knowledge, the people signing this are current registered active voters in Oregon. And so you should read the certification as you sign it. Let's say you have filled out 5 lines and you signed it, and then a friend comes by and the next day and they're like, oh, I want to sign. So you collect on the 6th line. You do need to correct the date, right, to the date after the last signature. What we recommend is don't gather more date or more signatures on a signature page if you've already certified it. Just use a new sheet of paper, a new signature sheet. But basically, the date that you're certifying should be the same as or after all of the signatures of the people who provided their signatures. And then I'll show you this as well, but on the signature sheet in the lower right-hand corner, there's like a number area. And I just need everyone to repeat after me. I will not
Will not
fill out
fill out
the sheet number.
The sheet number.
sheet number.
The campaigns team is very clear that we have to do this with all future volunteers. If you do accidentally fill it out, please send it back. Yep, exactly. If you accidentally fill it out, send it back to us and we'll fix it. But it is much easier for our campaigns team if you don't fill that out because they have to number it in a certain order. If you make a mistake while you're certifying it, you can cross it out and basically correct it and put your initials to show that, hey, I made a correction. If a voter makes a mistake as they're filling out, providing their signature, they can also cross out the mistake, correct it, and put their signature, or they can just cross out the whole thing and start on the next line, whatever you find easier. Also, we can't offer anything of value for a signature, even, like a cup of water. So when you're gathering signatures, please don't offer anything of value. And also, you can't collect signatures during your work time. And this is why the Secretary of State, if you're doing it during your work time, even if your work is not related to the campaign, they consider you a paid signature gatherer. And there's just a whole nother process for paid signature gatherers. So for example, when I'm collecting signatures, I use a different colored sheet that's pink, not white. And I also have to record my time and report it back so that we could report it back to the Secretary of State's office. For the signer, please ask, are you a current registered voter in Oregon? And sometimes people are like, I'm actually a registered voter in Washington. They can't sign, provide their signature. If they're not sure, they can just use their phone to go to oregonvotes.gov, which will show if they're a current registered active voter in Oregon. If it's like a 17-year-old who has registered to vote in the future, but they're not yet active, right, can't vote, again, they can't sign the signature sheet. When they're signing their signature sheet, providing their signature, they should provide the signature that they use on their ballots. And I don't know, have any of you had experiences where have loved ones or friends who've had a ballot returned to them because the signature didn't match? So our Secretary of State's office, they're great, right? They're doing work. They're making our election system safe and secure, but they do the work, to catch these, when people's signatures don't match. So they should use the signature that they believe they used for their ballot. And most people use the same signature, but sometimes some people don't. There's also an address field on the signature line. They should provide the address where they received their ballot. I did have a question from someone who said, hey, I'm registered as a voter at my home, but I receive my ballots at the PO box. And the sheet does say you can provide the address where you're registered or where you receive. Generally, we say just provide the address where you receive your ballot. If they're not sure, again, they can go to oregonvotes.gov and put in their name, and it will pop up that information. And it will pop up both where they're registered and where they receive their ballots, if those are two different addresses, and they can put in either of those addresses that the Secretary of State has. Also, they should make sure to write as legibly as possible, because we are actually checking every single signature to keep track and keep count. And so it's easier for our volunteers who are doing that to do that if the signatures are legible. And when we turn these into the Secretary of State, they will also have their own verification process. So again, writing legibly is very appreciated. A person can only sign the petition once. If they know that they've signed it before, they shouldn't sign it. Some people are like, I'm not sure. And so if they're not sure, they can provide their signature. And through our verification process, we will catch duplicate signatures. And also, in most cases, a signer cannot sign on behalf of another person. For example, for disabled folks who need assistance, there is a process for that. But, for the most situations, people should not sign on behalf of someone else. And if someone is helping a disabled voter sign, there is a process for that. And if they need technical assistance, we can provide it. Okay, some best practices. First, as I've said before, rallies are great for signature gathering. It's just so easy. And I think some of the folks I've talked to, they feel apprehensive about getting signatures because they kind of have the vision of someone standing in front of the grocery store asking people as they're going to the grocery store to get signatures. Right now, with so many rallies of all different types, I would suggest find one of those places. In some of our more rural communities where there might not be as many rallies, some of the places that people have suggested are festivals that are attracting folks with these types of values, as well as in front of the library. A lot of folks have said, you know what, I have a lot of luck in my community in front of our library. Also, I think, if you have a personal story as to why you feel so passionately about these rights, I think that's really great to share. And in fact, that can be much more impactful and persuasive to other folks than trying to share data. In November, about a week before Election Day, I actually went out to Missouri to support the ACLU Missouri with their ballot measure on abortion rights, and that passed. And that was actually the first state ballot measure that brought back abortion rights in a total ban state after the reversal of Roe v. Wade. So that was super exciting. And when I went out, I just simply told the story that I told you, but I condensed it into about 30 seconds. And to be honest, it was amazing at how many people also shared their stories with me as they committed to go out and vote for the ballot measure to bring back abortion rights in Missouri. If you don't have an answer to a question, it's okay to say, I don't know. And part of the petition packets that I will provide you links to, there are information sheets front and back. And if you print those out, on the back, there is an email for the campaign, and people can either go on the website to look up more information, or they can email the campaign their question. Also, you should do what's safe and what feels comfortable to you. So we are not asking you to go out and change the minds of voters who simply don't believe in these rights. And this is what I can tell you. We've actually done a lot of research on how many Oregonians support these rights. And, just learning initially about these rights and this campaign before any negative messaging, 55 to 60% of Oregon voters say, yes, we support these rights. So there are a lot of people in Oregon who support these rights in all of these communities. And so I would say really first, get signatures from people where they're not going to be arguing with you or giving you a hard time. Now, that being said, if you're able to convince some of your neighbors and family members who may, have some misinformation or disinformation in this area, great. And I think what they should all know is ultimately this is about protecting everyone's rights, right? I think this reminds me a lot of how Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg approached her work as an attorney. She said, hey, sex discrimination affects everyone, including men, right? Some of the cases she initially brought were when men were being discriminated against based on their sex. For example, there was a man who was engaged in caretaking for their parent who was ill, but they weren't allowed to access government benefits related to that caretaking. Only women could. And so ultimately, this really is about protecting all of our rights and stopping politicians from fitting us into boxes about what a woman should be or a man should be, because none of us fit neatly into any of those boxes. And I think that is a message that resonates with people across, the aisle. It's also really helpful to work with other people and to go out with your family and friends. Work in teams. That's a really great way to approach a lot of these events, especially the bigger rallies. Also, if you're, in front of a supermarket, if you decide to do that, so it's a private space, and if they ask you to leave, be polite and do leave the space. But some of those spaces you can try out where there's kind of quasi-public spaces. But the easiest places to do this is on public, spaces. And then finally, please have a pre, during, and post canvassing petition circulating self plan. When you're going out, make sure you have a hat, make sure you have water, you're taking breaks as necessary. When I was gathering the signatures on May Day, I actually had to take breaks intermittently because it was a lot of work carrying 2 clipboards and just having signature after signature. And so please make sure what you're doing to take care of yourself and again, to feel safe as you're doing it. Okay. This is a sample petition. So it's a little blurry, but you can see at the top, it says, this is the title that will be on our ballots. Amends Constitution, specifies that prohibited discrimination includes discrimination concerning gender identity / pregnancy, comma, related health decisions, comma, sexual orientation. Sometimes people will be like, why do they write it so short? Why can't they explain it more? There is actually an explanatory clause that will go more deeply into this, in our ballot pamphlets. However, they actually have to make the title a certain length because that's just set out in the law. And that's why the Oregon DOJ actually does the drafting of these titles initially, unless it's changed by the court later. They just have to basically fit within very specific word limits. And so there's a lot of art that's put into developing ballot measure titles. As you can see, these are the 10 lines that people can provide their signatures to if they support getting this on the ballot. The first column is for them to provide their signature, what they use for their ballots. The second is when they're actually signing this. And then the third column, putting their name. And then the fourth, basically writing where they receive their ballots. And if where they receive it is different from where they're registered, it says you can either provide your residence or your mailing address. So where you're registered or where you receive your ballot. At the bottom, there is a circulator certification, and that's for you, the person gathering the certification or the signatures. And it basically says, this certification must be completed by the circulator, and additional signatures should not be collected on this sheet once the certification has been signed and dated. And it says, I hereby certify that I witnessed the signing of the signature sheet by each individual whose signature appears on the signature sheet, and I believe each person is a voter qualified to sign the petition. I also hereby certify that compensation I received, if any, was not based on the number of signatures obtained for this petition. And obviously, as volunteers, you're not receiving any compensation. And then this bottom is where you sign as the person getting the signatures. Again, your signature, the date when you're signing it, your name, and the address. For additional information I want to provide to you is when you'd like to send in the signatures, probably the best way to do it, if you're outside the Portland metro area, is to mail it in. If you're within the Portland metro area, including, some of our cities, or counties like Washington County, you could always reach out to us. And if we have a staff member who lives close by, we could connect and get the signatures from you. And at this third bullet point, I did put in the email for my teammate Amanda, who works closely with me. So if you have questions or need support, you can email Amanda. And I'm just having Amanda help me with a lot of my emails. So Amanda will be able to connect with me and we can get all of your questions answered or provide you support. I'm also going to show you where you can print out the signature packets, but if you're not able to print it out, you can always let us know. You can email Amanda and tell us how many packets you'd like and how many signature sheets, and we can mail it to you. But here, I'm going to take you into the Bitly link that has links to all of what you need for your signature packets. So here, the first number one is a signature gathering packet. And you have to print out all 5 documents here. You should carry them with you. Document 1 is the information guide for signature gathering volunteers. And it basically, again, has the information that I presented to you tonight. So you can read through it. It's a 2-page document. The second one is the ballot measure text. And that is, in addition to the signature sheet, the most important document you need to carry around because you are required to carry the ballot measure text with you when you're gathering signatures. The third document is the actual signature sheets, and we can go into that so I can show you what the front and back looks like. The fourth document is an info sheet about our campaign in English, and the fifth one is an info sheet in Spanish. So if you're carrying around a packet, a signature packet, I recommend you print out all 5 of these documents. And for the signature sheets, print out a couple of them, or many of them, so that you have sufficient numbers of sheets for people to fill out. On this resource guide in number 2, I also put in a link to individual signature sheets, which takes you to our website. But basically, if you have a family member somewhere who's like, I don't want to gather any signatures, but I want to send in my signature, you can actually send them this link. It has a link to an individual 1 signature page that they can print out, provide their signatures, and mail back to the campaign. There's also a link to our campaign website that has more information about our campaign, including FAQs. If you also want to go through this training again, my colleague, Lindsay, who is one of our lead organizers on the campaign, did this training video a while back. So there's a link to it. And I'm going to provide you with this document so you have the link to all of these resources. And then 5, again, if you have any questions or need help, you can contact my coworker, Amanda, who will connect with me and we can support you. So the signature sheet, this document 5 in the signature gathering packet, it is 2 pages. So you basically, this is a signature sheet, this is the back. You should print this out on 1 piece of paper, front and back. So don't print it out on 2 pieces, 1 piece of paper, front and back. And make sure just to use regular copy or print paper. Please don't use things like cardstock, which sometimes people have done, and that does invalidate all of the signatures. Okay, so that is it. Let me get out of the presentation and answer questions you may have. And I'm also going to see if there are questions in the chat.
Several of you have asked for the links and where to find the links, and Sandy will get us those and we will put them in the newsletter that goes out tomorrow. So we'll give you kind of an abbreviated review of all this and give you all the links you need.
Teresa had a good question. We've heard that if there are invalid signatures on a sheet, that sometimes it'll invalidate the entire sheet. Is that right, Sandy?
Generally not. Generally the thing that invalidates the whole sheet is if you've gathered all the signatures, like you gathered 7 signatures, signed it, and then you gather another signature afterwards and don't fix your date. But I have asked about individual invalidations. Generally, that will not invalidate. And if there are duplicates, we are also doing quality control, and so we will catch those. So if someone's sure that they signed it, they shouldn't sign it again. But for folks who are like, I'm just not sure, they can go ahead and sign it, and we will catch them through our quality control process. Alan.
Okay, my understanding, if I recall from doing this, is that the requirement for the paper on which one might print these petitions is it's got to be 20-pound paper.
I've just been using the regular, but I will get clarification for you. But I don't think it's anything different from kind of the regular paper
Well,
that
and I
people
think
use.
that the regular print paper is
20
that
pounds. Okay. Yeah.
thickness, but I think there's a requirement. So my message is don't just take some skinny paper and run that
Yeah.
through.
Yeah. Just
So-
use the regular printer copier paper, nothing that's lighter or heavier. The person who's doing the signature should fill out all of their information. And also, if they make any changes to the information they filled out, they should put an initial so it's clear they made the changes and not the person gathering the signatures. And there was a question. The signature needs to be done by the voter. Can the gatherer fill out the rest of the information? And the answer is no. They have to fill out all of the information, including providing their signature.
What about, there's something about handicapped, somebody who's got, I know they have to sign, but what's that?
I know that for people with disabilities who can't sign and need someone's help, that help can be provided. I'm not exactly sure of the other steps, but what I'll do is when I send you the informational sheet, let me look that up so I can put that information in.
There's a question about when the deadline is for gathering signatures.
We would appreciate it if you can send it in so periodically, right? So don't wait, but the ultimate deadline is the very beginning of July 2026. So, I mean, as an internal deadline, I think we're really going to be aiming for May 2026, so we feel confident. But the final deadline is like the second day of July 2026 or so.
I would suggest that you, as you gather, depending on how many you're gathering, like I've been gathering them at my rallies, at our local rallies. And so after I gather, 5 sheets, I'm going to send those in. And, 2 more sheets, and then maybe I'm not going to get out for a couple weeks. I'm going to send those 2 sheets in. So just send them in as you complete them.
Thank you. I agree with that. The other thing that helps us with is our process of checking through each of the signatures actually, requires some amount of volunteer and staff time. And so it's helpful too if it's a constant pace, so we can do that part of the process too.
Is that something that you need volunteers to help with, that you could
I would-
use volunteers to help with?
I think so. Right now, we don't have a process for that to be remote. So for
Okay.
folks who are in the Portland metro area, that would be super helpful. And so let me also get that information about how you can sign up to volunteer. But that
Alan,
would
is your
actually
hand up again?
Yes,
Alan, could I first ask Trish because I saw Trish's hand up.
please.
Yes, I was wondering, my printer does not do both sides. So for the petition part, if I got a packet from you all with a couple of petition things, can I go to like, one of the UPS stores and run off copies on both sides? That's
Yeah,
okay.
you can totally do that.
Thank
And
you.
Trish, you can just tell us to send you a whole bunch of signature sheets. So if you're just like, send me, 50, we will be happy to do so.
Thank you so much.
Alan,
Okay, thank you very much. One of the things I am going to be doing, and a lot of folks associated with Southern Oregon Climate Action Now and probably other organizations are going to be doing is collecting signatures for the right to a healthy environment. And I think an important question is whether you guys have any concerns about those of us who are collecting signatures for both petition drives.
I think it's fine.
Okay,
Yeah, as long as it's clear that it's just 2 separate petitions and you're gathering
Yes,
signatures for
yes,
both of them
yes.
and you have the materials for both, I don't see any issues with that.
I'll have another question. I have another question, but I'll pause.
well, go ahead, Alan. I think you're next in line.
Okay. I come from a biological background, and I noticed that one of the questions that you are concerned about is the sex, discrimination as to sex. And I'm wondering if there is a specific reason that you use that term instead of what I personally consider a more biologically correct term, which is gender.
So the reason is that's actually the language that's already used in the Oregon Constitution, that the equal rights provision uses sex, and then we added the gender identity and sexual orientation. And there was a lot of back and forth with when we were trying to do the legislative referral, whether to use gender identity, or sex. And so ultimately, there was a lot of discussion amongst all the lawyers, including the ACLU National and Planned Parenthood lawyers. And this is a language that they felt was best protective. So that's it. But there was a lot of discussion about whether we should use gender. And to be honest, if it were me, I would have included sex, gender identity, and sexual orientation. Because
Mary
that is also how I think about it.
Mary Beth notes that it requires permission to access the packet link
Okay,
that you put there. So I don't know if you want to change it to anyone with a link, but
sure. One sec. You know, the Google Docs are great for protection, and then sometimes I feel like as much as anyone with link.
there you go.
I think that should do it.
Awesome. Well, I'm excited about gathering signatures. We have some big events coming up, and if you do too, then you might find people within your organization to collect these signatures on behalf of your indivisible group. I mean, a lot of us are like on June 14th are going to be busy running the rally, but at this point you might just get a designated small team of people that can get out there and collect as many signatures as possible. It'd be awesome if we had all these before January. I mean, wouldn't it be great that we could just slide into that deadline and not stress? And so, so I hope everybody will do what they can on this. And if you have any questions, you can certainly send them to us. We will rebound them to Sandy if need be, but we'll put everything we can in the newsletter tomorrow.
That sounds great. Thank you, Terry. And I just wanted to let you know, in the link that I sent you, the signature gathering guidance document, that's 2 pages. If you read through it, it really provides you the guidance you need to do signatures. And so you can also use that to train your friends and loved ones to do it. And if any questions come up, just let us know and we can answer them.
Terrific. Well, thank you so much for coming tonight, Sandy. I learned a lot. I didn't know this was happening. Somehow it wasn't on my radar. So I hope all of you will share it to the people in your organizations, share it to other groups that are within your communities. I mean, if you have a Pride event coming up soon or something like that, make sure that you activate, educate those people that live near you with the other organizations and say, hey, you need to come on board here. We all need to pull together on this. So please do what you can.
Gary, I
So-
want to add something too about this. What I think is so important about this is we obviously need to get 200,000 signatures to get it on the ballot. But the
250.
other thing that's so important is that as you're talking to these people about it, you're educating them about what's going to be on the ballot. And it just really helps get the word out there so that they know, oh yeah, this is that thing. I'm voting for this. So it's also really not just signature
the vote.
gathering, but it's also education.
Because I bet there will be a force against it, right?
There
Sandy?
absolutely will
I mean,
be.
when the time comes when it gets hit on the ballot, then there's going to be this giant, monster reach up that says, this is horrid and terrible. In which case, if we've educated these voters ahead of time, we're halfway there. Or more than halfway. How about that? So, yeah. So thanks, everybody. We know we've gone past our
Thank
8
you.
o'clock time. We appreciate you coming and we appreciate you faithfully showing up every 2 weeks. Our next meeting will be in 2 weeks from now. And I think we're working on having a speaker at that time, but I don't think that person's quite secure yet. So just watch your newsletter and tell other people in other organizations to please show up. We'd love to see all of you here. The more the merrier.
And speaking of the newsletter, if for those who are new or for those who are old folks but don't get our weekly newsletter that comes out on Wednesday, I did put the link in the chat. So just scroll up from the bottom just a little bit and you will see the link to our coin newsletter, and you'll have to sign up tonight in order to get tomorrow's newsletter with all this good information from Sandy, as the newsletter comes out tomorrow.
Okay, thanks everybody for coming. We
Thanks,
think
everybody.
you're awesome. We appreciate all your work and we hope to see you in 2 weeks.
Thank you, guys.
Bye.
Thank you.